Should you attempt to rebuild an automatic transmission at home? Well, it depends on a few things, right? If you are going to do just one transmission that needs a repair, and you probably never do it again or never do another one, 50-50, maybe you should do it. Maybe it'd be better to just bite the bullet. They're expensive though. But if you're going to do more than one, or if you're going to mess with your transmission, make some adjustments or whatever, definitely get into it. It's not that difficult, and it's not that intimidating. It's just mechanics. The other thing is, if it's your car that you're using all the time, you probably don't have much choice. You've just got to get somebody to put a transmission in there because you need the car. Let me give you 4 or 5 things that you'll need. And the first one, well, we'll put that at the end of the video, talk about it later. The second one is you need a good manual. YouTube videos are really good. There's some good guys building on YouTube that'll just explain it step by step. I also have a PDF manual that's floating around somewhere on the internet, how to rebuild your 700R Ford. It goes right up to 4L60Es. And if you need that and can't find it, just put your email in the comments there and I will email it to you. But that's what I follow, step by step, go through it. And if you do that, you're guaranteed to not have any trouble if you do it step by step, right? But then the other thing is, what kind of advice should you really follow? There's so much advice there on YouTube. In fact, I listened to one guy a couple weeks ago as I'm getting ready to rebuild the one for my 42 Chev, and he hates 700R4s. And so he's talking about them. He said, I never use one, I never have one in anything of mine. I'm like, well, I'm not going to listen to this guy, right? He's not going to give me anything but negativity. But there's a lot of guys that are really pro rebuilding. Of course, these transmissions have been around for 20, 30 years probably. And in fact, I used to just buy them from GM. I bought a brand new one from GM. It was the last time I could get one when I did this 55 Dodge. It's really nice because it actually has, 80 upgrades from the beginning of that transmission to the end of its production. If you could still get them from GM, that would be the thing to do because they are totally fixed and upgraded. Everything that you needed to change was already changed in there. But we'll change a few things as we go building these things because they're, you'll notice that the YouTube guys say, well, the throttle valve, you should update that to a non-stick one and just some of that kind of stuff. Besides the manual and the YouTube videos, you're going to need 2 days. And the third thing is you might need another transmission. And so a month ago, I went and tore one out of a junkyard, and there's a video on that just a few episodes earlier on how to do that effectively and efficiently because there's some challenges there. Took another one out last week because I was still missing some parts. So I've got 3 transmissions. Out of the 3, I can make 2 good ones. And once you make one, you might as well make another one. And by the way, don't get one from the junkyard or used offline and just stick it in your car and hope it'll work. Even though the junkyard has a guarantee, it's taking you longer to take the old transmission out and put the new one in to see if it works than what it would be to just invest in a rebuild, even to just do a quick rebuild, okay? So number 4, the 4th thing that you're gonna need is parts. And there are stages of rebuild that you can get the kits for these transmissions. So the kit I have laying here is a banner. So there's an overhaul, there's a banner, there's a master and a super master kit, right? Come with different levels. And basically what it is the level 1 is you're just going to change the seals and maybe the friction plates, right? And a few odds and ends. Level 2 is going to be all of the steels and the friction plates. So you've got a whole set of everything that's needed, the band for the reverse drum and all that kind of stuff. Apart from that, you probably might need to buy a pump rebuild kit, which I did one of those. And then there's a super rebuild kit that comes with everything. Comes with the bushings and everything. And that's one thing you're gonna look at is, do you need to change the bushings in this transmission? And they don't take a long time to change, a little bit of work, a little bit of patience, and a little bit of attention. But it's probably worth it if you're looking for using your transmission for a long time. So along with the rebuild of the overhaul kits, you probably need a new torque converter. Put a new torque converter in because you don't know what shape the old one's in. You don't know how much longer it's going to last. And then you need a handy part source. Because if you buy your parts online, which is a good thing, you kind of look ahead and you say, okay, I'm going to need this and this and this. You gather everything up, you buy it all. Then you start rebuilding the transmission and it's like, oh, okay, I need that too. You're going to probably need a transmission shop somewhere around that'll sell you those things because sure enough, it's going to happen. Now, special tools, that's the big question, right? I guess that's the fifth thing you need, is a bunch of special tools. The first thing you're gonna need is to either make or buy a transmission jack. Now I made this jack here to fit it perfectly on my transmission, the 700R4, and then go back and catch the transfer case as well, because you know, in a 4x4 with solid axles, you want to drop that whole thing out at once. And they're really heavy, of course. So make it, you know, I just made it on my floor jack, drilled some holes in the round cup thing there and bolted it on, welded a few sticks of steel together. And boy, I tell you what, that saved me just a lot of back-breaking work and danger. Now, years ago, I changed the transmission in this truck and I used an engine lifter and took the floor out and lifted it that way. And that thing had that time, a cast iron transfer case in it. That was so heavy. They sell cheap transmission jacks as well. But you know what? For a few sticks of steel, you can make one. Then you're going to need things like snap ring pliers, a couple of snap ring pliers. This one here that has the, you know, the little eyes that the snap ring goes on the inside of a bore. And then this one here where the snap ring goes on the outside of a bore and it has to expand rather than contract to come off. And you'll see this one here, I've ground it, especially because there's one particular snap ring in taking these 700R4s apart that's a bit of a challenge, and it's hard to hook onto. It's right on a spline and you can hardly see it, let alone catch it. But once you get it, you kind of understand. And that's why I've ground it like this with these two little points on there, so they'll kind of get in behind there and really force that clip out. You'll need some picks, you know, those cheap little picks. They're used dental picks or whatever they are, for taking the rubber rings and stuff out and for moving pistons out of the valve body. A feeler gauge, you need a feeler gauge, and you need a calipers. What happens is when you put the steel rings and the friction plates all together in a pack, in each pack, and there's like 4 packs, I think, that go into transmission all together. They have to be loose, but not too loose. And so you'll put them all together, put the snap ring on, and then you'll measure the clearance between the last plate and the snap ring. And for some of these, a lot of these, the thickness is heavier than the actual gauge, so you can put 2 of them together. So if I want 1.4 millimeters, I put 270s, 70 and a 75 together. And I think that's what this one is supposed to be offhand. Yeah, that's about it. So that's about the right clearance right there, so that it shifts smoothly, doesn't jerk when it shifts, and it doesn't slip. Some of the clutch packs are measured like this before you put them in to the drum. Zero this out, measure from the top of this shoulder down to the table. Make sure you got a flat table, and it'll tell you how to measure them. Usually you'll measure it maybe without the wave spring or whatever. It tells you in the instructions anyway, and then gives you the number that it should be. And what happens is, if it's not the right height, or when you're doing the feeler gauge thing and it's not the right clearance, then you have to go back and change these to different widths. And I find it handy just to, you know, if you got a lot of stuff around, then pretty soon you know this is a 0.88 thickness, and you'll find some that are like 0.65 or whatever, so you can do it thinner that way or whatever. But you want to, doesn't matter how many actual clutches you have, how many layers you have, what matters is it's the right thickness. And sometimes you have to go to the transmission shop and get a thicker or thinner steel, or 2 or whatever, to make it the right height. Now these ones here, right, we just took them apart. First time I've looked at them. They're in pretty good shape, not a problem. I do have new fibers to put in, so we'll do that. Keep the same old steels. They probably last forever unless you burn them or scorch them or something.
Not as hot as Grandpa, so I got your spoons. We're going to use a spoon. Where should we put this? How about over here? Let's help him, Jack. Help him carry it. Oh, okay, he's got it. Okay, there you go. You guys got lots of honey in yours. That white stuff you see floating around, that's just honey. And spoons if it's too hot. And this is for Grandpa. This is for you. And this is a Chinese snack you can.
Mine's going to taste like oil.
Just do it carefully. Here's your
Just do it carefully. And then the real special tools that you can't do without is this spring compressor and this big one here that goes down into the body of the transmission. And it's really important to build one of these or buy one of these. And I just made this again out of a piece of kind of like channel. I think it was actually square tubing or something from an old trailer hitch, and just cut the section that I needed, and then a piece of ready rod or all thread, whatever you call it where you live, and you know, some nuts on the top, and weld a washer in there so that basically you slip this into the bore of the transmission case, and it will force down the springs that you need to remove the spring clips from. Yeah, it's just too hard otherwise, and too dangerous, because you can bend up the springs and the set of springs. This whole cage thing here will bend easily if you're not really careful and don't push straight down on it. And then this other one, I haven't made one yet, but I'm going to just make one here. And what I'm going to do is cut another piece of channel kind of thing that goes over the right size of this spring. It's inside this drum. And then I've got holes in my bench, my workbench, and I'm just going to run a ready rod right through there and just use nuts and suck it down. So I'm just going to use this hole, run the ready rod through it, and to compress the spring to get the clip in and out of this one drum. Yeah, it's a special tool that cost me 25 cents. I've done it by just prying it with pry bars and stuff like that, but I think it's just better to make something that you could just methodically put some pressure on the spring, remove the retaining clip, and then gently let the pressure off. Then the next thing is a bushing driver. I just bought this set on Amazon. I've done a few transmissions without this set, and I've just, you know, looked around for a piece of pipe the right size or a piece of rod or whatever, but I got tired of it. So I just ordered this set on Amazon. It's whatever, it's 80 bucks Canadian or whatever, comes from China. And it's got all of these sizes, and boy, I tell you what, it's a lifesaver. So you find the one that goes inside here. We're close, 44, yeah, okay. And then you find the one that's big enough to catch the outside and still not bigger than this. Try that one. No, too big. It's got to be this one. Okay. So there, put the screw in. Don't get in the way of the camera. And then you can drive that in. Oh, one more thing, special tool. To get the bushings out in the first place, you use this tool, and you can buy them, or you can just take a chisel and grind it like this. And then what this does is when the bushing is inside the case, you put this on there and you smash it with a hammer and it cuts. And in fact, if you're careful, there is a place where the bushing is joined, right there. You can see where it joins there. If you hit it right there, it'll come out real easy. And that's how you smash it out. And then you get this set up, drive the new bushing in. Gotta have a tub of transmission assembly grease, because, well, just imagine this, those little balls, 5/16 one and a 1/4 inch one, that's what they are. You just stick a bit of this grease on and stick that ball in place, and it'll hang there all day, and otherwise, yeah, I don't know how else you'd do it. So this stuff dissolves properly in the transmission fluid. It's also, we put it on all of the bushings and all of the moving parts and everything, so that when you first start your transmission, you're not starting anything dry. And another thing that you're going to want to do is soak your fibers, soak your discs, you know, the clutches, before you put them in the transmission, because you want everything to start wet. A couple of these big jugs of transmission fluid, tell you what, they take a lot, because, you know, I think the transmission takes like 4 liters or something like that. But there's a torque converter, it takes a ton of transmission fluid. And then the lines and the cooler that you've got going up to the radiator and all that kind of stuff, it takes me pretty well these 2 jugs full to get up to the right level, you know, with a new transmission install. Of course, you want to be really careful. Say, don't overfill them. But I tell you what, you fill them up and it's come up and you run that thing, and then the next thing you know, the dipstick is dry again, and you do that several times before it seems to get enough. And then I always get it over full. So here's a trick that you want to do every time, and that is put a drain plug in the pan, the belly pan of that transmission. They don't come with them. Now I've seen guys that have put in, they have some kind of a air gun or something that shoots in a rubber plug, right? Don't do that. Whatever you do, don't do that. The last transmission I got out of the junkyard, they'd done that, and they'd actually like put a hole through one of the actuators, like totally busted it to pieces and scarred up the other one. And I talked to a guy at the junkyard that same day. He'd bought a transmission for some Japanese car he had. Same thing, they'd blasted one of those rubber plugs in there, and it ruined the transmission. He put it in his car and it didn't work. When you pull a junkyard transmission, it might have one of those. If it's got a rubber plug, somebody has shot something up into that transmission, and very likely something in there is broken. Another big thing is cleaning parts. I wish I had a parts cleaner, but I don't. Cleaning all of the little parts, I just use a pan of gasoline or whatever, and then air compressor, and blow everything off and dry everything off, and then soak it all in transmission fluid for all of the parts, the internal parts, the valve body and all that kind of stuff. You want to put it all together with a lot of transmission fluid in it. But then the case is another challenge. They're so grubby, and the grease is, so I use degreaser, and then I use my pressure washer, and then hot water, and so many things. It's really hard to get them clean. I wonder if I shouldn't just sandblast them. It'd look a lot better. But get them as clean as you can, and the trick there is to clean it out with whatever degreaser and stuff, and then blow it off good. A pressure washer is good, and then compressed air, and dry that thing right out immediately, so that you don't have any residue of any degreaser or anything like that left in your transmission that'll corrode parts. And one thing you'll never have enough of is rags or paper towel. This transmission, you take them apart and they leak transmission blood, gallons of it. It just keeps going and going and going until you've got all your parts washed. And then you're using more transmission fluid to put it all back together. So it's just everywhere. Properly, you would have a steel table, and I've got a steel bench here that works pretty good. But the proper transmission rebuild table is actually a steel table that slopes to the back a little bit, and in the back there's a gutter that all the oil will just slowly run into, and then it runs down, on a slope and into a bucket or whatever. So that's going to be a challenge. So I keep a couple buckets handy, one for oily rags and one for oil that I can pour in every once in a while. There's enough oil in the case that you can just dump it out and pour it into the bucket. And yeah, you'll get a ton of, old transmission fluid. Of course, you can't use it for anything. It goes to the dump. Now, back to the first thing you need. You need a winning attitude. You need a I will not quit attitude with these things. Let me take you outside and show you something very embarrassing. This 1942 Chev has had transmission troubles. I can't believe it. I put a manual lock up on it because it was getting too hot. I'd pull the trailer a lot, and I've pulled cars all over Western Canada, and that tends to make a transmission hot, right? So when you're driving with a trailer on a 700 R4, you want to make sure that you're in third gear. I would love to get it so it locks up in third gear. Most of them lock up in fourth gear, but third gear is the one that that you're using when you're pulling a trailer. Anyway, it's not all perfect. There are some that do lock up in third gear, and I'm working on a system to do that with this truck. But anyway, my point being is that methodically, step by step by step, I got this one in last couple weeks ago, rebuilt it, and then put it in the truck. It's working fine, shifting good. And then I come back in the shop and there's this spacer sitting on the bench in the parts pile. Oh man, I forgot to put that spacer in. What are you gonna do? You're gonna take a chance on running the transmission without a spacer that it's supposed to have in it? Nope, you're not. You tear the whole thing out again. And so that's when I actually put a new case in too, because my old case had some broken parts in it. Some of the little hunks that are on the side of the case, right, that hold things together. So I've got a new case out of a 4x4 in the junkyard in here, and then put that all together. What I noticed when I went back was that the PDF that I'm talking to you about, it didn't actually specifically say put that spacer back in. I guess they just assumed, or maybe it was in a different part or something, but I put that part together, and it was just the one just behind the pump, right? And so anyway, it's good. Took it all apart, So that's what I'm saying, a winning attitude. Don't give up. I can beat this transmission problem. I mean, I've rebuilt this transmission, that'll be like 3 or 4 times now since in the last, 6 or 7 years. Getting tired of it breaking. I'm not getting tired of rebuilding, I'm getting tired of it breaking. I love rebuilding it because I'm getting better at it all the time. But yeah, so have that winning attitude, like, you know what? It's just mechanics. It's just metal. And well, some fiber, some fluid, whatever, but it can't beat us. So tomorrow morning, me and my grandsons are going in the 42 Chev down to Larry's Transmission in Calgary, Alberta, and we are going to buy a few more parts to put this last transmission together that's on the bench and to get it out of the way. And it's a transmission, like I say, I'm not going to use for another few years, but I'm building it for a project. I don't know, maybe my 46 Chev Coupe, maybe my 51 hardtop, I don't know, something. We'll put it into something just handy to have. Or you can always sell it, you know. They're getting so expensive, right? To buy a rebuilt now, you're looking at minimum $3,000, oftentimes $5,000, and if it's anything special, it'll be above that. So it certainly is worth learning to rebuild it yourself.